Hello and welcome to a new episode of Blocktales Unchained Story. And today I have Bridget Greenwood with me. And I'm super happy that she takes time to talk to me because she is in the space already quite long and she started already super early. And so, Bridget, maybe you can start with a short introduction and afterwards we will dig deeper about your history and your past and what you already did in the space.
Of course, and thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you. I really appreciate it. So yes, I'm Bridget Greenwood. I am the founder of The Bigger Pie and the co-founder of the 200 Billion Club. Since I became a parent, my son is now 18, I recognized that actually going into the workforce and being able to manage, being a parent and working was very different to not having to do that. It sounds quite obvious, but so but I was like, oh wow, this is really different. What does one do? And I reached out to other communities to say, how do we do this? And they were like, we don't know. We're all making it up as we go along. And then so pretty much since then, I've been making stuff up since I go along. I used to be an independent financial advisor before I was pregnant and had Zach. And that was kind of self-employed. So I've only been employed for about 5 years of my entire career. And the rest of the time I've been making it up as I go along. So that's kind of some background. I went from being a financial advisor, having a mini retirement when I had my son for a few years, and then came back into to work. And I didn't know what to do or where I could do it. Where I lived, I didn't live in a city. I lived in the countryside. So there weren't job opportunities on my doorstep. So I kind of had to create my own. And so I started a company called Financial Social Media because I'd been studying social media. This was way back, well before digital marketing strategies. We didn't have Instagram, WhatsApp. We barely had Facebook advertising, and just creating really good organic content.
Nowadays.
Sorry? Hard to imagine.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely fine.
Hard to imagine now.
Yeah, I know. But you would just create good organic content and you would get traffic that came to it because you were offering value. So I understood the financial services world. I understood social media, and I set about to help companies, financial services, to be able to leverage. Now, what I find really interesting, having gone through that, is these banks, these building societies said, one, we don't understand it. Two, our clients will never want it. Nobody wants to be public when they're talking about things like money. Three, it's a reputational risk. Four, we don't know how to regulate it. So we're not interested. Then there was a case where NatWest had some tech issues. And for about 3 or 4 days, they couldn't process any payments. So mortgages weren't going through, salaries weren't being paid. And of course, everyone was turning to Twitter to go, what's going on? Because they were not communicating their message very well. But at NatWest was Natalie Weston. She was a primary school teacher. So as the other financial institutions looked at this, they said, there by the grace of God go us, and started to be able to take the idea of at least having your own social media handles seriously. But when we look at what we're doing with cryptocurrency, when we look at what we're doing with Web3, when we look at, talking to financial institutions, so I came into the space in 2017, then all the companies said, we don't understand it. Our clients don't want it. It's a reputational risk and it's a regulatory risk. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but you've said that about stuff before. We know that this is going to be something that in a few years' time, everyone will be using in some form or of another. So, so then I came into the industry because when I first joined, and in helping companies with their social media, we did not have the structure we have now. We did not have the toxicity, the manipulation that I feel that social media as we have it today with the Zuckerberg's algorithms, etc. When you look at Cambridge Analytics, when you look at the way that the various elections have been influenced and manipulated. So I really didn't want to stay putting any coffers into this industry, the social media industry, and was very excited about the new technologies when I had 2 sets of friends who told me about Bitcoin, both of them male, in their groups. And I was fascinated because having been a financial advisor, having seen and lived through the 2008 literally man-made financial crisis, the idea that Bitcoin was a response to that as an alternative, you don't always have to have all of your money in this centralized system where you actually have very little control of what goes on, and depending on which region you're in and which country you're in, you'll see those impacts even more, especially when we look at countries that are going through hyperinflation, for example. So I found that fascinating.
Sure.
So I sort of dove down the rabbit hole to say, okay, what is its promise? What is it trying to do? How close are we to achieving that? And then, of course, there were, because it's open source, there were all the other projects that came out from that. So that's how I got started in the industry.
That's super nice. And well, did you do everything like in your private life, like at the beginning, because you said running down the rabbit hole? So did you do it in the evenings, or and how did you get your first job in that space? Or yeah, how did you
Yeah.
start to earn money? Maybe this is another question, because you said you had been as an employee working only for 5 years. So I think you did not start as a normal employee in any certain company. So what happened
No,
afterwards?
no, no. So, I mean, it was about 18 months that I had been introduced to Bitcoin by my various networks, but I still hadn't figured out actually how to buy it. The older I get, unfortunately,
All this.
the lower the technical barrier that still is a barrier for me, happens. It's awful. And then, so then I said to a friend, I said, "Oh, I still haven't bought any." He said, "Oh, for goodness sake. Transfer some fiat money, transfer some money, download this wallet, and I'll send you the equivalent of BTC." So that's how I got my first holdings. And he said, "By the way, I want to do this as a company. Would you like to join me?" So then I joined him
Wow.
as a startup. So all sweat equity. Yes. And that is now BCB Group, which
And
has
what
done
did the company
incredibly
do?
well. So initially he wanted it to be a broker, but it's now BCB Group, which is basically the bank for crypto companies. So that's how I got
Interesting. How long
started.
did you stay there?
Just a year. I did it in the first year. And in that time, I was able to see just how widespread blockchain technologies can be used in every industry across all sorts of supply chains, transparencies, medicine. It can reshape every industry, not just within financial sectors, which is obviously the route that I came down. And I was fascinated by, we have this potential, this technology. So it's peer-to-peer, borderless, permissionless. Because of the technology, we can have micropayments now. And if you look at what happens across the globe, to varying degrees, but across every country, women have less access to finance, to capital. They are underpaid compared to their male counterparts, and they have to do far more of the heavy lifting of the invisible and unpaid work. So a lot of the financial instruments that we have and environments that we have where women can get paid are not set up for their needs of today. But now we have this technology where we can do that. When you think about all of the women across the world who have skills in the creative economy, in what they can produce locally, who have to have flexibility in how they deliver their value, all of a sudden, this technology would allow us to say, actually, we value what you're doing and we choose to, send capital your way in return for the value that you give us. But no one's going to build that, unless it's women involved. The people who are facing the problems are the best people to be able to solve the problems. So I had a look around. The women in the space were amazing. They still are. And I'm not saying the men aren't. I'm just saying I studied the women. And so they had multiple degrees. They spoke multiple languages. And this is 2017, 2018. So 2017, we had a hockey stick of Bitcoin prices going up. And, it was a bit like we've seen the summer last year, is everything you touch turned to gold for a moment. And then, of course, a lot of that washed away. So we had my first crypto winter, 2018. But these women who were left in there, and I find it interesting when we had those cycles, because when the tide goes out, the people who are left that have been attracted for all of the news and hype and reasons that came in stay for the technology. They understand actually how we can use this and start building. And so the women were building and they were amazing, but there's just not enough of them. And I reached out and said, look, you are absolutely outstanding in what you do, but do you feel that as a woman you would like to have support? And the answer was very much yes, please. It's very difficult for us to connect with other women. We can do it when we're on panels like if you're a lawyer and you go to various conferences and you're on the panels, you can meet other lawyers who are female, but you don't get to meet the founders. You don't get to meet the developers. There's no cross-pollination of different disciplines. So that was one of the first things that they said they wanted. And so I decided, okay, what I want to do actually is dedicate my time supporting these incredible women who are already in the space, making sure that they have visibility, connections, opportunities, and they can be the role models to attract other women to come into the space to be able to do the same, and that we all support each other on that journey. So that's really where the Bigger Pie came about, is to make sure that we can have role models, see it's possible, attract other women, and then retain those women in the space. Because in the tech world, women leave at twice the rate of their male counterparts, because then they're just not given conducive environments in which to thrive.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of these. And I think it's super important what you did and what you built. Because as you said, it's hard to connect. There are not so many women in the space. It's yeah, we have a higher barrier to enter everything. But so how can women get part of the bigger pie? What do they need to do? How can they become part of the bigger pie? Maybe just let us know a little more about that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're happy to drop links in when we air this, that would be great, and I can do that. But it's really the
Sure.
zero barrier to entry. We started off on WhatsApp, and then we moved over to Telegram, and then the OGs of the Bigger Pie don't want to leave the WhatsApp group, so now we have both. Just FYI. So come into the community. You'll see on the Telegram, we have various different topics, so you can come in, you can introduce yourself. If you want to know about what's happening with events, then there's an event section. If you're looking for opportunities, either to hire someone or to be hired, then we have a channel for that. We talk about various topics. We put on events, which we deal with online. And from the Bigger Pie, since we've been running that, we've also seen a number of other women-focused Web3 organizations and communities sort of grow from us. So we're able to connect you within our community, within the Bigger Pie, but also to other communities around the globe that focus on various areas or might be focused in different geographies. So it's a question of coming in, introducing yourself. I love to have a conversation with all of our members to understand how I can best help them. But more importantly, what I found over the years is actually we need a blueprint for how do we attract diverse talent? How do we nurture diverse talent? How do we make sure that we can promote diverse talent? And how do we make sure that we can send funds towards diverse talent? So if we look at Web3, a lot of it is a startup ecosystem. And a startup ecosystem relies on using your network. You don't have much budget. And so if your network is a couple of male founders, then ultimately you're going to build with more people like your network. Large organizations have larger resources and tools and other things to be able to make sure that they can have access to wider pools of resources and talent opportunities. So it's important that we're able to help these startups. I mean, been in the startup world for a while, and you understand it yourself as well, Sarah. So feel free to add sort of your insights into this. It's very difficult to build. You're racing against people. You have to make a certain amount of traction if you want to invite investment, because they want to see, a company that is able to grow quickly and to grow fast. You're under a lot of pressure. So to stop and say, okay, well, how do we find diverse people? How do we find people outside of our network? It's difficult. So why don't we give people a blueprint of saying, here are all the resources, here's where the talent is, here's the verbiage that you could use. Because if there's any women listening, or not if there's any women listening, but to the women who are listening, how many times have you looked at a job opportunity and you can tell by the way it's written, or when you've done your research into it, that company looks like it's not going to be as supportive for you as a woman as another opportunity is. So you don't even put yourself forward. So I know that there are companies out there and organizations out there who want to hire more women, but they don't know how or where. So why don't we give them a blueprint to do that? So what we're doing is we're building the DEIB, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging Playbook for Web3, in hand with academia. So it's the ecosystem and academia. So we're researching what we're suggesting to be best practices, and creating this blueprint. Now, if you have a blueprint, that's great, but to be honest with you, still, it's going to be difficult to implement. So once we have the MVP up and running, we're going to change this into software as a service. So it doesn't matter if you are looking at the growth stage and you're looking to hire, or you're looking for co-founders, or you're looking at who to partner with in the supply chain. Ultimately, once what we're building gives you the access to or the best ways to implement that and find those opportunities.
Wow. Okay, this was a lot of information. So to let everybody know what you just talked about is about your second company. It's the 200 billion club, right?
No, so this is still on the bigger pie. The investment side does fall into it. So on the bigger pie, so the two companies I have, yeah. So the two companies we have is the bigger pie. So the bigger pie, you think about being able to support diversity, particularly with a gendered lens when it comes to women in blockchain and Web3, whatever the word of the day is, because it's changed over the years I've been in the industry. And so that's to look at every side. So how can we upskill, attract, retain, upskill, position, women in the space. Specifically,
So
on
quick
this.
question, how did you get how did you get in the VC space? Because you
Yeah,
said, like, especially for startups and for women, is it quite hard? How was your transition that you decided, well, especially in the VC space or in the startup space, we need to do and need to change something?
yeah. So everything that we spoke about, is supporting women. But role models are incredibly important, and role models are incredibly important. And as we said, a lot of this space is in the startup world. So how do we get role models? Well, we have CEOs of companies when we think of Jobs, of Apple, and Gates, and the top tech men. They were all founder CEOs who got invested in. Women do not get invested in. The VC funding that goes to all female teams pre-pandemic was 3%. Post-pandemic, it's less than that. We're going backwards, even though we have a world where technology allows far more access to talent, to resources, to VCs. You can have meetings online now. You can have much more flexibility in your work. But we're going backwards, which just breaks my heart. So I realized and was horrified by how little funding goes to female founders. And just before the pandemic, I had the first and only in-person event, which had 69 female founders in the room all day, and a bunch of investors. The investors were all open to investing in female founders. So we had panels throughout the day where they could learn from and share their insights. Then we had networking sessions, and then we had pitching sessions. So this was a really great event, but it was literally like 2 days before lockdown. And then lockdown happened, and of course, nobody knew what was going on. So instead, we decided, well, what can we do that we can do online? So my dear friend and co-founder, Dr. Amber Ghaddar, was going through the journey of leaving her corporate world, becoming a founder, and raising funds. She couldn't understand why, when she looked at her, pedigree and her business plan, why male counterparts were raising larger checks at faster, in faster times. So I explained to her about the unconscious bias that happens within the VC industry. And then she successfully raised, and she had a soft exit. And she came back to me and said, look, Bridget, we need to do something about this. What can we do to make this path easier for female founders? And so that's where the 200 Billion Club came along. The 200 Billion Club is dedicated to getting pre-seed to Series A founders, underrepresented founders, investor ready. And we have a whole process and accelerator program that we're very proud of. And we have over 200 VC partners in our network that we can introduce our founders to. So the things that we found that excluded women from getting funding is, one, you need a warm introduction to the VC network, and it's mostly a boys club. So how do you break through that? And that's why we have over 200 plus VC partners. We understand their investment thesis. We understand our startups, and then we intelligently match them to the right ones. And then the second part is slightly less easy to solve, and that is the bias that happens during the pitching process. So most VCs are used to a tech founder being a young white man, and that's what they're used to. And when they see something different, what happens is you ask male founders promotive questions, and that's all about the opportunity of the startup. It's all about the plus side. But when you see a founder that doesn't look like the norm, you tend to ask them preventive questions, which is all about the risk of your startup. And this is really important because you raise 7 times less if you are asked preventive questions and if you're asked promotive questions. There was a study that was published in the Harvard Business Review. So they tested it on asking preventive questions to male founders.
The problem is that this bias is not clear to everybody. So if it would be clear to everybody, then people can really think about how they can prevent or what they can do about making it easier. But if people do not even know about that bias, and like what you just said 7 times, this is such a huge difference. This is crazy. This is this is so much.
So 82% of all startups backed by VCs come from a warm introduction. And I think you're 13 times more likely to get to the investment committee. So warm introduction is a huge game changer for you. And then 7 times, again, the difference in how much you can raise, 7 times more if you are asked promotive questions. So we do need to make sure that VCs understand that these bias exists, that they happen to female VCs as well as male VCs, because we're all exposed to the same norm. And it's making sure that they have in their design process a balance of preventive and promotive questions that they ask every startup, regardless of what they look like or their gender or any other background that might trigger more preventive questions. So that's one side. But what can the founders do? Well, if you can recognize a preventive question and you can answer in a promotive way, you can bypass that bias. So it was not just down to the VCs being able to improve how they assess startups, but the founders actually have power in this. And this is what we teach. This is what, we teach someone, we assess their pitch deck, we assess their narrative. We understand what makes a persuadable narrative for VCs. We help our founders to be able to craft this. And then they pitch to us, and then we go through and we ask a whole bunch of preventive questions to make sure that they know how to answer them in a promotive way. And then we introduce them to our VCs, and they can have mock pitches with the VCs. Those VCs tend to be at a later stage. So, if you're a pre-seed, it would be a Series A investor who understands your vertical, understands the marketplace, and is happy to give you all of the critique on the reasons why they won't invest, what they need to see for you to improve. Because you don't get this access to VCs, that they're not there to coach. They're incredibly busy. They see a whole bunch of pitch decks on a regular basis, and quite often founders don't receive the feedback very well, so they just kind of leave it. But we have a safe space where we allow our founders to have that interaction with the VCs.
Yeah, that's super cool and super important, especially what you said. If the founders do not get feedback, there is no chance that they can really grow. And if nobody tells them what they are missing or lacking, how should they know? Because especially if they are first-time founders,
Exactly.
they can't imagine what is necessary and what is needed. So this is so important what you're doing. And so maybe you can also tell us a little more. How can people apply for the 20 billion club, 200 billion club? Sorry.
It's called the 200 billion club because that's how much money, between 200 and 250 billion could be added to the UK's GDP if we invested in women entrepreneurs in the same way that we invest in men. That's just in one country. So imagine if we're able to,
wow.
So we've no idea of the opportunity cost of all of those businesses that never got the funding that we could have seen that comes into the world that would be profitable, sustainable, solving real world problems. Women tend to lift up their entire communities. So it's vital. It's vital that we're able to give these talented founders with incredible ideas and visions and ability to execute the resources, the funds that they need to be able to do that. So in terms of the 200 billion club, it's the 200 billion BN.club, and then you can apply online there. What we found, though, is like everything takes longer than you expect. And the amount of time that we spend with our founders meant that we can't help as many founders as we wanted to. We also very much believe in having the motto of we don't want to leave any founder behind. So we're always looking at what can we do to say we have various networks, you can come to us, we can only deal with a small number of founders at the moment, but we can send you to the right resources or to the right network. But I'm delighted to share with you. This is an original, a first debut conversation about it. That actually we're able to now, and we're creating a product called Pitch Genie. So what Pitch Genie does is it basically takes any startup founder through that investor journey. So first of all, you can take a quiz that says, how investor ready are you? And you can uncover vital insights about your startup, how prepared you are for investment, where you're doing well, where you're lacking. Then we'll be able to let you know what to do next in terms of where you need to improve. We have a scorecard, so it's a pitch strength analyzer, so you can put that through. And we'll give a clear and comprehensive assessment of your pitch deck, the strengths and the weaknesses. Then we can help you to master your narrative. So as we said, we work with our founders to be able to shape and craft a compelling story to take what you've got. And where we've seen that there are areas that can be improved on is giving you that narrative to make it persuadable for VCs. Then we can take you through a Q&A session, going through those preventive versus promotive, listening to what your answers are, and then giving you improvements on how to respond in a more promotive way to questions that VCs are most likely to ask you about your startup. A financial plan creator, because obviously it's incredibly important that we're able to show the VCs the numbers that are important to them. We can take you then through when you've got everything and you can pitch again. We can do the mock pitch to be able to help you to, practice, deliver, and conquer on your nerves and get your feedback. So based on that mock pitch, we'll have another graduation scorecard. So that says, this is where we started. This is where you've improved. This is a scorecard that we think that that we believe that you're at, which will make you very much, and you can see, are there still things in your startup that you need to change? So, for example, we had people in our cohort after the mock pitches, 20% of them realized that actually what they had wasn't VC investable. And what they needed to do was to go back and sort of refine what they were doing. And they did that within 3 weeks. 50% of them had received funding. So, it's not, sometimes you need to look at the model that you've got, but this will be highlighted through this process. And then, we can help you craft that email that you can send to VCs, talk to you about how to personalize that VC engagement to each VC, make sure you understand their investment thesis, that you're reaching out to VCs that would be interested in what you're doing. And then we can give you access to database of a whole bunch of VCs. And then for those of us that, and then the next stage is we can invite the startups that we think have, amazing promise and that come from underrepresented founders, and then sort of bring them into our elite circle. And then we can work with them one-on-one. We can open up our VC network, warm introductions to them. We can sit on the calls with them. We can help them with that process until they close. So I'm very excited by that, because that first part, we're able to now really help a huge number of startups.
Yeah, I love the process you just described. So I've two questions on that, because I think from my perspective, it seems to be a hell lot of work. Because the process, there are so many steps in, and like every startup is different. And I had the feeling that there are so many steps you really have to do as an individual, going through every pitch deck, helping every startup. But you just said that it will be easier for you now with this process to help many startups. So how are you going to implement it, and what's the magic behind it?
Well, the magic behind it is generative AI. Since we've had learning language models, LLMs like ChatGPT, it's incredible. So One of the things that was shared with me that I found really interesting, if you want to build a fast car, you use engineers, right? So the Formula One cars are built by engineers, but it's a different skill set to drive them. So to be able to get the best out of these LLMs is a different skill set to be able to build them. And it's taking your expertise that you know in the industry. It's taking the years that we've been working and coaching, the hours and hours that we put into this, to be able to drive the AI model to be able to help every startup in a personalized way, similarly to how we do on a one-to-one basis. So it's using this AI technology, and I know everyone's using AI, and in the same way that we've seen, if you put blockchain in front of it, if you put metaverse in front of it, that seems to be the hype. But there are some incredible use cases, and I believe that this is another one of them.
Wow, really, really impressive. And especially using new technology to help women in this space is like an amazing thought. And I'm really looking forward to what you're building. So, how many startups went through your accelerator or through your program until now? And what do you think, or what could you imagine how you can scale it? I
Absolutely.
mean, in terms of numbers.
Yeah. So we are building the I'm calling it Pitch Genie. So the AI coach, we are building that. So any startup who's interested in piloting it, please come through, because we would love to have testimonials. So you'll get access to this without having to pay the full price, because we're building this together and working with you to get the feedback, which we appreciate. So that would be fantastic. In terms of the cohorts, previously the cohort sizes that we could do would be 8 to 10. And that would be sort of 3 months plus that we're working with them. And when we stay with our founders throughout, we have the coaching process, we go through the accelerator, but then we always stay with our founders after that event to continue to support and help them. So 8 to 10 people in a cohort. We've done 2 cohorts. Now what we can do is it's literally, we can help 10, 100 startups a day. That's the ability and the joys of being able to scale up by using the technology. But it's phenomenal. I'm more than happy to sort of go through it with you, Sarah. I know that you work in the BC and you've got lots of startups, and we can certainly look at how this technology perhaps would be able to help with your startups to be able to personalize that journey, that messaging,
Yes,
that narrative, that story, those questionings. Really excited about the power of this.
we should. We should definitely do that. I think it's, yeah, I really like your approach, um, because yeah, startups normally are super individual, to individual cases, but yeah, using that technology make things so much easier.
Mm.
I really like the idea, and yeah. So you said you are still like in the beta phase, right? So
Yes.
the program is not yet up and running, but you're testing at the moment,
Yes,
and the
exactly. So
testing phase is
anyone,
already open.
yes, I'll share with you another link. And so there's this is Google form if you're interested in the pilot program. That's the best way to get in touch with us, and then we can get back to you, and then we'll take you through those steps that I mentioned just now.
Absolutely, I definitely have to use it. I definitely have to go through it, and I will definitely share it with many startups. I just love the idea. So
Amazing.
so interesting.
Yeah, and I've tested
So
it myself, obviously, and I'm very excited about the quality of the output. And then you can take your text from the narrative and then just with a click of a button turn that into a pitch deck. It's quite powerful.
well, thank you for sharing all your thoughts and all your experiences. So, are there like some what are so like two questions? Are there like really your biggest learnings? Do you have anything in mind to share what you experienced? And maybe, and the question is a little similar. Do you have any kind of advice, especially for people or for women out there trying to build, trying to get into the space?
Yeah.
So yeah, experiences, learnings, advices, because yeah, you're so experienced. So yeah, please.
So we need all of the women to come in to the space. We cannot have another technological wave, another generational transference of wealth, and another way of doing business built by a few for a few. Women have historically been left out. All of the research, all of the data shows that when you bring in incredibly capable women into situations, into businesses, then they build better products that are more suitable to more people, that are more profitable. And I know that I've spoken to so many women and what they have a vision for the future, we really need to be building. So don't worry. So first of all, in blockchain technology, you're right, it's permissionless. The technology itself is permissionless. Anyone can come into an open blockchain and participate. It's permissionless. So I always want to give the women, look, just come into the space. It's permissionless. Give yourself the permission. You're the only one who has to give you the permission to come in and to get going. Use the skills, experience, insights that you have up until now. They're all transferable. Nobody knows what they're doing in this business. It's been going for like 10 decades. We're still making stuff up as we go along. Come and join us. Join communities for sure. Certainly come into the bigger pie. Tell me what it is that you're interested in, and I'll point you to a whole bunch of resources and communities and people that you can learn and grow and share with. That includes going to events, it includes local meetups, plus online activities. Please do that. And just don't worry about thinking that you're not good enough. Don't worry about this idea of imposter syndrome. Just get on and build. And the more that you build, the more that you'll realize your capabilities. I know that I made it sound more simple. It is that simple. It's not that easy. Trust me, I have plenty of moments where I completely and utterly become anxious, 100% doubt myself, think, why would I do this? Why not somebody else? Oh, on a regular basis. But you just shut up, build. Like, just shut up and build. You're building something because you can see that it's not already out there in the marketplace that suits and serves. So just build and reach out to all of the networks. We would be delighted to help you because you're not expected to know everything and do everything yourself. And also, it's 24/7, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. So do make sure that, creativity, solutions, productivity, they require breaks, not to be on all the time. So do manage a full life, because then those moments of genius that come in, those spurts of productivity, are way more powerful than running on a low battery.
Wow. Well, I guess there could be no better words to wrap it up. I think, yeah, I already said it like 2 times, I guess. It's amazing what you're building. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. It was a pleasure having you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'll share with you all the resources and links so that people can follow up from the conversation.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.